What would be the things you'd advise businesses to do to make sure they are being inclusive to neurodivergent people?
I think send signs and signals as a business that you embrace neurodiversity. And that can start from senior leaders in your organization coming forward and saying they've got ADHD, they've got dyslexia, they've got children with dyslexia. I mean, we've got to be private about people's children, but maybe them talking about family connections or them having it themselves. I've seen a lot of leaders recently, their children might be diagnosed with ADHD, then they realize they've always had it. So senior leaders, people in the workplace talking about it. When you have your neurodiversity staff network set up, maybe having profiles somewhere on the website that says, I'm person X, I'm autistic, I'm supported by MVF in this way. And then people looking to come and work with you would be like, all right, I can see these profiles that are there. Something I saw from one organization was they had a particular person that you could contact if you had a neurodiverse condition or disabled to say what adjustments you need at interview. Instead of, and it sounds so small again and so basic, but instead of it being like recruitment at MVF, it was Catherine at EY. They had like 500 people contact her. And interestingly, 70% of them dyslexia. I think people respond to a picture and a name rather than recruitment at. So I think sometimes when I work with employers, they like really surprised because I'll say these like 5-6 simple things and they think I'm going to do them a big audit and undertake all this stuff. But it's not, honestly, it can be such small things to be inclusive.
And then what kind of reasonable adjustments are needed for those, let's say in the interview process for if they had dyslexia, dyspraxia or ADHD?
It can be things like questions in advance. People often think that's controversial, but if you remember, we talked about in the training how some people have like strengths in certain areas but challenges in others. If you've got a difficulty in working memory and an employer says to you, tell me about a time you had conflict in the workplace, what did you learn from it and what did you do and what would you do differently next time? It's 4 questions. Really hard to remember those even just now as I've said them. So some questions in advance can help with that. And the idea of reasonable adjustments is to bring people up to the same level as everybody else. You know how we have our buildings all need to be accessible now? We never think, oh, that gives someone an advantage. We just think that, levels the playing field. And that's what I'm trying to really get employers to understand. And so often with questions in advance, people say, oh, they're going to prepare it too much or stuff like that. But actually, isn't it just a good way of giving someone the opportunity to present their best selves? Alternatives to that are printing out the question on the day so that, like, if you're interviewing me now, I could look like I have looked at some of the questions, like when I've been panels and stuff before. You might already know what questions are going to be asked if you're on panels and stuff. So then just being able to look at them there and then can help. So printing out questions, or if we're doing a lot now virtually, putting the questions in the chat box.
So as they're being asked or beforehand?
Yeah. So if you're okay with questions in advance, I'd do it in advance. That's gold practice. I also think as they're being asked is fine. Okay. So you could just have them typed up before you do the interview and just cut and paste them in once you've said it. But I've seen that work really well. Extra time sometimes for an interview with the processing stuff that some people have more reflective processing. Going first on a day or last, that can make a big difference.
What do you mean by going first?
So if you've got dyslexia or ADHD or autism, dyspraxia, you might have higher levels of like anxiety. Sometimes it's associated with lower self-esteem, lower confidence and higher anxiety because, like I said at the start, people only identify what they can't do. It's going to provide anxiety. So if as a reasonable adjustment, someone's got higher anxiety, but they're the first interview of the day, 9 o'clock, the rest of the day is not spent worrying about it. So, and again, it's tiny things, isn't it? Like you might not even thought about it, but makes all the difference.
So we've gone past the interview stage. Once you're in a business, what are the sort of kind of day-to-day reasonable adjustments that could help people?
So for people with dyslexia, it could be even little things like 2 screens. If you're involved with lots of like different numbers and information in your work or calendars, getting dates out for your calendar and then putting it back in your email, 2 screens can help with that working memory. Things for like dyspraxia. Another one that often people will challenge me on is I've suggested organizations provide, if you're dyspraxic, you can sometimes struggle with coordination, like sense of direction and stuff like that. But a lot of dyspraxic people will be great in like jobs like delivering training or getting new business, working with clients. So if you're off site and you need to get out and about like London, it can be good, or wherever you're based, it can be good to have taxi allowance. And actually, it wouldn't even be that much. But then that your organization wants to sell something to another organization. You want your person turning up, looking at their best, not stressed, not having spilt coffee down them, stuff like that. And little things like that taxi allowance would alleviate all of that. I don't know if you've ever tried to exit bank at the right exit in London.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So I think that's how it can be for dyspraxic people all the time, everywhere.
Yeah.
So little things like that. Autistic people, it can be that the managers just use very clear, specific, precise instructions. Like you almost need to think sometimes from your non-autistic perspective that you're being pedantic. So saying things like, can you do that report by 4 o'clock today and email it back to me? Because I've had incidences where autistic people have nearly lost their job because they've done all this work. The manager says, well, I've never seen it. And you talk to the autistic person, they say, well, then no one ever told me I had to send it on to anyone else. And to you, that might, or people that are non-autistic, that might seem like, well, it's obvious, but it's not always obvious. So just being very clear, specific and precise for autistic people. And I think for people with ADHD, some sort of acknowledgement or acceptance, they might not always be at their desk. Yeah. So walking meetings can really help. Just acceptance that someone isn't always at their desk from their peers, their colleagues, and manager can really help. So that's 4 across the 4 we talked about there. And obviously, I could talk about many more all day, but
yeah, I remember in the training. Yeah, I remember the training you were talking about kind of sensory stuff.
Yeah.
So was it not being too bright or something like that?
So yeah, it was different for everybody, but some people with the sensory processing difference, the fluorescent lights flash for them, but they don't flash for other people. It might be even sat next to a plug. Some autistic people said to me they can hear the electricity, so just moving them away from there. Yeah, so I think it's asking people sometimes, like, do you find something difficult in this environment? But sometimes you might need to be precise and say, is the lighting distracting you? Is there any noise distracting you? You might need to be quite specific about it. But I think when I started my career, sensory stuff wasn't even thought about. So that's something that hopefully workplaces will start to think of a lot more as move back towards offices.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if you're aware, but MVF have recently changed offices as well.
Okay.
Our new offices in Old Street opened up in April, I think, so a couple of months back. And the amount of planning that the space team did, and they've really created an amazing environment where you've got like quiet spaces, you've got like focus spaces, you've got collaboration spaces, and like there's different lightings. We even have like a Zen zone. So if people just need to kind of like chill out do some meditation or whatever it may be, like we've tried to accommodate for every kind of scenario. It's obviously hard to do it for every kind of scenario, but like it's a massive ask, and I know a lot of planning went into it.
I love that. So when people say, how can we make our building like autism friendly or neurodiverse friendly, it's not one answer. It's what you've just said. It's having quiet spaces, focus spaces, collaboration spaces. What I like to do in the workplace is in the morning I feel quite buzzy, so I want to like be around people, and then in the afternoon I might want to go and be a bit quieter, and that's so good. That's what neurodiversity for me is about, that we recognize, celebrate, and accept that we all think differently. And then in the workplace, how can we sort of allocate for that or allow for that? And I think what you've said is perfect. So I'd love to come and see them when we're all back in and allowed. And you like reference you guys.
Hey, you're always welcome at MVF. Everyone really loved the stuff you were doing with us. So we'll have you back anytime.
I love it. I've been frustrated this year doing so much online because I spent my whole career trying to avoid a 9-to-5 desk job. But hopefully restrictions will be lifting soon, and we can have a bit of a hybrid model. So sometimes training will be in person, sometimes it will be online and stuff like that.